Hi, my name is Tanner Long, and today I will be speaking to you about a juvenile delinquency case that is completely out of the ordinary that some of you may have heard of or seen in the news in the past years, but this one just really stood out to me, and I wanted to share it with you guys. Juvenile murder. What do you think the youngest age could be that someone actually commits a murder against somebody else? When I think of a murder, I think of maybe like a 20-year-old or 20 years old and up, someone that's had issues in the past with anger problems and doesn't know how to control themselves. Um, how do you think someone could actually commit a murder at the age of 10? Yes, 10 years old is when Robert Thompson and John Venables committed the violent and horrific murder. Robert Thompson was born on August 23rd, 1982. He was the fifth child out of six brothers. He was raised in a very tough environment. His dad was an alcoholic, his mother was an alcoholic. His brothers all beat each other. It was pretty much like survival of the fittest. Like the oldest would beat the youngest, and the second would beat the second youngest. And pretty much, if you were the youngest, you were at the bottom of the food chain, and he was the second to youngest, so he got a lot of the bullying done to him. Robert was pretty much known as the kid that tried to avoid confrontation. He would, if confronted, he would cry or just try to lie his way out of something. But throughout all this abuse and neglect from his parents and brothers, he kind of developed a quirk pretty much to pick up on this horrific thing that he did. John Venables was born on August 13th, 1982. They're very close in age. Um, John's mother suffered from a severe depression and repeatedly beat John as well. So both of the boys were beaten as children. He was very scared of his mother. He was beat so much that he would stack up all of his toys along the edge of his bed, and he would try to make like a wall on the outside of his bed so that his mother couldn't come and hit him while he was sleeping. Venables was he was very familiar with the social workers as they were always checking on him because he was always being beat and showing up to school with bruises and stuff like that. Um, Nature of the case. Okay, so Robert Thompson and John Venables, they were friends. They were both 10 years old, and they abducted and murdered 2-year-old James Patrick Bulger. The two 10-year-olds had abducted burglar from a shopping center. Burglar or Bulger was accompanied by his mother at the shopping center. The boys abducted him and pretty much walked him down the street and then to a railway. And once they got to the railway, they began all the abuse, like kicking him, throwing rocks at him, and actually shoving batteries up his anus. So they abused him very roughly, and then after that, they left his body on the railroad tracks. And eventually, he was hit by a train, and that's how the body was found. Thompson and Venables were charged on February 20th, 1993, 8 days after the murder. The pair were found guilty on November 24th, 1993, making them the youngest convicted murderers in modern English history. Just think about when you were 10 years old, what were you thinking about? You were going to elementary school and all you were worried about is if you were getting pizza for lunch. and these two children abducted a 2-year-old child, walked him away 2.5 miles away from the shopping center, and mutilated this boy. They killed him. They ruined his life and his family's life, and I just could not imagine doing something like this at such a young age. The parents of the offenders, they were the parents could have been the complete problem within the murder case because all of them abused their children, and most of them had some kind of problem, alcohol related or depression related. So if they would have spent more time with their children and less time beating them and less time drinking, then I'm sure that they could have somehow steered clear of this. Both of the child's parents were abusive and neglecting. After the murder, the parents of each of the children got the wrath of it on the streets by society. So when they released the names of the children that committed the crime, they went out of their way to try to find their parents, try to make ends meet with them, and they blamed it all on them and yelled at them and attacked them on the streets and stuff like that. My question is why? Why in the world would two children commit such a violent and horrific crime against a young child that has no defense? Think about a 2-year-old. What can a 2-year-old do to two 10-year-olds? They can barely talk, let alone defend themselves with two way older boys throwing rocks at them and stuff. There's really no excuse for these two murderers. There should be no reason to abduct a small child and kill them and leave them for dead. Just to there's no reason for that. Both children were raised in harsh environments, but still, I mean, it's tough growing up in a harsh environment. But you can't do all this murdering an innocent 2-year-old. The punishments, initially the two were sentenced to custody until they reached adulthood. Once the boys reached 18, they were actually released under new identities and on lifelong license in June 2001. So these boys committed a disgusting crime, a disgusting murder. So they spent 8 years in a home that they had TV and video games and all kinds of stuff until they were 18. And then once they were released, they had a brand new life. They had a new identity, so no one could find them. They were pretty much just set free. So all in all, the two of them, they lived under custody for 8 years, and they were granted new lives. A lot of people do not agree with this. Did they get what they deserved? No. Millions of people all over the world still to this day do not believe that these two boys were punished harsh enough. Many people say that they should have been locked up for the rest of their lives. There's no way that someone should be able to get away with something like this, especially this mutilating and horrific. Is there an explanation for this? There's an explanation, but there's not a excuse. I'd say the explanation it goes back to their parenting. Yes, their parents both abused them and neglected them so far that they had so many issues mentally and psychologically and all of that. I don't think that there's an excuse for this. Child abuse is an ongoing issue that just keeps snowballing because the terrible habits of abuse are being passed down from generation to generation, and we need to put a stop to this.